I spoke with CNN correspondent Anna Coren, who travelled to Afghanistan to report on that deepening humanitarian crisis. I started asking her about whether that process we just witnessed is a new phenomenon since the Taliban took control.
We know that it's been happening for generations. Girls are considered to be a commodity. But our people on the ground, the local journalists on the ground who told us about an uptick in these cases say that the reason for this was because of the economic and humanitarian crisis facing the country. So we then did our own investigation. We not only tracked down these three families in two provinces, Ghor province and Bagdis province in the northwest of the country, two very poor places, but we also spoke to mullahs, these tribal elders. We spoke to members of the Taliban. We also spoke to human rights activists on the ground in Afghanistan. And they all said that where once it was perhaps behind closed doors, it is now out in the open. And the reason being is because people are facing starvation. So by selling their daughters for $2,000 US, they are able to have enough money to then feed the family. And we know that Afghanistan is going into a very brutal winter.
So it's at a point where very poor families just have no other options but to sell their children to feed other members of the family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is what these families are facing. They all said to us, whether it be the fathers, the mothers, the grandmothers, that if they had a choice, if there was aid getting to them, and two of these families live in camps for internally displaced people within Afghanistan. They say humanitarian aid isn't even getting to them, so that if they had the food, if they had the money to support the rest of the family, they would never have resorted to this. I mean, this is a true act of desperation. But we know that since the collapse of the government back in August, the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban, the international community has frozen, more than $9 billion in central reserves. They consider the Taliban a terrorist organisation, or at least an organisation with links to terror organisations like Al-Qaeda. They're trying to hold the Taliban to account on their appalling human rights record, particularly when it comes to women and girls. Sadly, that leverage, they're trying to use that leverage, is not having much impact on the ground because it's not changing the way that the Taliban is behaving. So we're here at this stalemate. There's limited aid getting into the country. We spoke to the United Nations that said that more than half the population doesn't know where their next meal is coming from. We know that there are millions of children that are facing acute malnutrition. We know that there are 5 million, if not more, Afghans that are internally displaced within the country, living in these camps. And as I said, Afghanistan is going into a brutal winter. Parts of the country will be covered in snow. It'll be much more difficult to deliver aid to these areas. So places will be cut off, places will be isolated. And according to the United Nations, they believe that people in Afghanistan will be facing starvation, and it won't be just a few people that will be dying. It will be a huge number.